Hi friends, welcome back to Learning Space. So this is the 18th module with regard to art and culture, and this is a very interesting module because we are going to see about the temple architecture. So this is a new thing that we are going to introduce, which is the temple architecture. Along with that, we will also be seeing about the art and culture which has been brought about because of the Gupta period. The very first thing is the art and culture influenced by the Gupta period. Art and culture, it reached its zenith during this particular period, which included Hindu, Buddhist and Jainist art. Now understand, they are basically Brahminical kings, your Guptas, but they actually patronized every other religion also. The salient contribution, it is actually can be divided into paintings, Gupta paintings, the sculptures under Gupta period and the temple architecture under Gupta period, the coins under Gupta period. So these are the various things which will be dealing, and the very first thing is your paintings in the Gupta period, and the prominent painting is your Ajanta painting. The mural paintings of Ajanta are a contribution of this particular age, although in this particular Ajanta caves you also have the paintings brought about by the dynasties of Satavahanas and the later Vakatakas also. The paintings, as we have seen before, it includes the images of Bodhisattvas and the Jataka stories. Sculptures in Gupta period, yes, this is by far very important, especially the ones that I have marked in green color. Now understand, the Dashavatar temple at Deoghar, this is a very prominent temple wherein you have this particular reclining image of Vishnu, and it actually marks one of the important stages of the temple architecture. Your temple architecture, it actually progressed in stages, and this proves to be one of the defining stages of your temple architecture. This was one of the earliest construction of how your temple used to be. And during this particular phase, both the Gandhara and the Mathura schools of art flourished, but there was also another prominent school of art, which is your Sarnath school of art. The images of Vishnu at Mathura and the images of seated Buddha at Sarnath, they are the prominent sculptures produced during this particular period. So if they ask for the examples of sculptures during the Gupta period, then you can very well quote the Dashavatar temple at Deoghar. This would be point number 1. And the second example that you can quote is the seated Buddha at Sarnath, and the third example that you can quote is the sculptures of Varaha at Udayagiri caves. So in the last module, we saw about the Udayagiri caves, and this particular sculpture of Varaha, I have explained in detail about that also. So that would be the third example with regard to the sculptures during the Gupta period. Further, the standing images of Buddha at Mathura and the Buddha's bronze statue, that's again important. There has been a bronze statue of Buddha, and these are some of the great examples during this particular period. Moving on to the temple architecture. This evolved during this particular period as seen from the Dashavatar stone temple at Deoghar, and there was also another temple architecture which is very well prominent during the Gupta period, and that is your Chaturmukha Linga temple of Shiva at Nachna. Nachna of Madhya Pradesh has some of the prominent Hindu temples, and another prominent temple is your Chaturmukha Shiva temple at Nachna, Madhya Pradesh. Cave and rock cut sculpture flourished during this particular period, and the important rock cut caves are Udayagiri caves and the Elephanta caves of the later period also. And the famous in your Elephanta caves is your Trimurti sculpture. And coming to the coins aspect, a number of gold and silver coins have been minted during this particular period, and particularly they show Samudragupta, he is playing the veena, very prominent coin with regard to the Gupta period is this particular coin, and these particular coin, they show images of Samudragupta. He is holding a royal scepter, holding bow, performing Ashwamedha Yagna and playing veena. So this is where he is playing the veena, and the coins with images of other rulers have also been found. Gupta period, as I have told you, it is rightly called as the classic age or the golden age of history. The Gupta period can thus be described, because of the art and culture works that we have seen, it can be rightly described as the classic age of art and culture in the sense of the degree of perfection that it has achieved. Now, this has never been achieved before, and this sort of a perfection this sort of a balance and harmony of elements and style, that has not been achieved even later periods also. So that is why this has been described as a classical age. The Guptas, they were Brahminical, but they actually showed tolerance towards the other religions of Buddhism and Jainism. Puranic Hinduism, with its three important deities. Who are the three important deities? We had Vaishnavism, we had Shaivism, and we had Shaktism. So all these forms of Hindu worships came into prominence during the Gupta period. Now, while Shaivism, it developed in the south and the southeast regions, Shaktism, it developed in the eastern parts of India and also in some parts of southwestern Malabar. So this was with regard to Shaivism, and then coming to Shaktism, and then we had Vaishnavism. Now Vaishnavism, with its emphasis on Lord Krishna, it had its main regions being the northern and the central parts of India. So this is where, or this is how, your three Puranic Hindu deities of Vishnu, Shiva and Shakti got into prominence during the Gupta period. And the prominent temples during this particular period, it actually evolved or revolved around these particular deities. The setting up of sanctuaries, which means the temples, for the images of gods goes back to perhaps 2nd century BC. But what happens is, these temples or these devagrahas of the pre-Christian centuries, that have been excavated in an extremely fragmentary state. It was not well preserved, and that is primarily because of the perishable materials that was used in these kinds of temples. These devagrahas, which was built in the pre-Christian eras, that was built out of perishable materials, and that is why they were not properly conserved. They were excavated in a very fragmentary state. It was in the Gupta period, point number 4 and 5 is important. It was in the Gupta period that building with everlasting materials began. It took into birth during this particular Gupta period, and they have used materials like dressed stone and brick. And the Gupta period thus can be said to mark the beginnings of the Indian temple architecture. Temple architecture could be prominently said that the Guptas laid the foundation stone for it. Yes, now the basic form of Hindu temple. You have to understand the basic terminologies with regard to the Hindu temple. Some might know it, some might not know it. So we shall go in detail. Very, very important with regard to the mains answering part. The basic forms of Hindu temple comprises of the following. You need to understand there is a Garbhagriha or a sanctum sanctorum. You have a cave-like sanctum, which is the Garbhagriha, literally meaning the womb house. Now this is the small part where you have the main deity being stored, and this is a small cubicle with a very single entrance, and later on it grew into a larger chamber with a slow progress of time. And they got much attention because they housed the main deity. So Garbhagriha is made to house the main icon, and much of the focus or much of the ritual attention has been given to the Garbhagriha. Moving on, the entrance to the temple, it can be a portico or a colonnaded hall. A colonnaded hall meaning a column, it is filled with columns on either side. It is filled with pillars, or it is filled with columnar structures on either side. It may be a portico or a colonnaded hall that incorporates space for a large number of worshippers. So this is the Brihadishwara temple of Tanjavur, and if you take this follows, or this proves to be the mandapa of this particular temple, and this is where a large number of worshippers are housed. So this is a colonnaded hall. Moving on, yes, now you have the Shikara or the Vimana. From the 5th century AD onwards, freestanding temples tend to have a mountain-like spire, and this is called as Shikara in the northern temples or North Indian temples, and this was shaped in the shape of a curving shikar. This was in the case of your North Indian temples, you have a curving shikar. It was not proceeding in a straight line, it was more of a curving nature. And that is why in the case of the Nagara styles of temples, which is your North Indian temples, In the Nagara styles of temples, you had a curvilinear shikars. And when you move to the southern parts of India, you had something like this. And this is known as the Vimana. Now, this is a pyramidal tower. This pyramidal tower is known as the Vimana in South India, and the styles of the temple is known as the Dravidian style. So, this is the difference between a Shikara and a Vimana. Yes, now let's put it in a picture of whatever we have learnt till now. We have learnt about the Garbhagriha, we saw about the Mandapa, and then we saw about the Shikara also, a basic form of a Hindu temple. We are yet to see about the Vahana. The Vahana is what we are going to see right now. The Vahana, it is the mount or the vehicle of the temple's main deity. So, if you have Shiva, for example, then you will have the picture of Nandi. So, this is a religious depiction, you need not worry about it. So, this is the mount or the vehicle of the temple's main deity, and most importantly, you will be having a Dwaj or a standard pillar. So, this pillar like structure which is placed directly opposite or directly in front of the main sanctum, that is your Dwaj or your standard pillar. Now, this is it about the Dwaj and the Vahan. Moving on, two broad orders of temple have been brought into picture, and as I have told you, one is the Nagara style of the North India and the second one is the Dravidian style of the South India. At times, you can also see that there is a third style of temple architecture also. So, they say that there is one more independent style of temple architecture which is known as the Vesara style of temples. Now, this is more of an amalgamation of your Nagara style and a Dravidian style. It is a selective mixing of the Nagara and the Dravidian orders, and this is mentioned by some scholars as an independent style also. So, elaborate studies are available on the various sub-styles with regard to each and every primary style. So, even for example, the Nagara style, it is divided into various sub-styles. So, all that we will be dealing in the forthcoming modules. Now comes the main part. Now, till now we were dealing about the structure and each and every part of your basic temples. Now, here we have the sculpture and the iconography and the ornamentation of the temples. So, you need to know about the iconography of each and every temple. The study of images of deities, it falls within a branch of art history which is known as iconography. So, such an image is known as an icon, and the study of these icons put together forms to be the iconography. This consists of identification of images based on certain symbols and mythology is associated with them. Every region and periods, they have their own distinct variation of iconography. So, there is a regionalistic styles of iconography, and most important I would say is point number 3. In order to understand and in order to read the philosophy which is behind one particular temple, and to understand the history which has gone beyond the sculpture of that particular temple, you need to understand the iconography which has been inscribed in the walls, in the gopurams and in the surroundings of the temples. To understand the art and the culture which is present during those particular period and in particular those particular temples, you need to read the iconography of that temple. The philosophy of temple lies in the iconographic structures present in those temples. So, they form the fundamental part of the conceptions of those temples. Yes, now the placement of an image, it is carefully planned. For example, river goddesses, so they are placed in the very entrance. Like for example, you have the Ganges and the Yamuna rivers. They are placed in the form of a deity, river goddesses. They are found at the entrance of a Garbhagriha in the Nagara styles of temple, which is your North Indian temples. Moving on to the south, you have Dwarapalas. Dwarapalas, they are usually found on the gateways or the gopurams of the Dravidian temples. So, this particular Dwarapala, it is a very big Dwarapala. It is present in the Brihadishwara temple of Tanjavur. Similarly, you have some other important iconographic structures. For example, the Mithunas. The Mithunas are a set of erotic images. Some couples have been placed in each and every temples. So, this forms to be the Mithunas. Followed by that, you have the Navagrahas. Yes, the 9 planets, and yakshas. So they are placed, all of them are placed to guard the main deities. So this is each and every iconography that has a certain meaning attached to it. Various forms or aspects of the main divinity can also be found in the case of the outer walls of the sanctum. Like for example, the deities of the directions, which is the Ashtadikpalas. These are the Ashtadikpalas, that is your Kubera, Isana, Indra. Not very much important from the examination point of view, but it is good if you know it. So these are the Ashtadikpalas which face the 8 key directions on the outer walls of the sanctum and or on the outer walls of the temple itself. Moving on, subsidiary shrines. Yes, important. Around the main temple, if you have the main temple, around that you have many subsidiary temples for the other gods also, who are dedicated to the family or for the incarnations of the main deity. So these are the subsidiary shrines. Along with subsidiary shrines, you have further ornamentation of the temples. Like for example, you have this particular kalasha. Kalasha is present in each and every temple, and that is one of the ornamentation tool. Followed by that, you have this kind of a mythological figures. Like for example, a lion. These are known as Yali. So these are basically mythological figures. So Yali, Kalpalata, Amalaka, Gavaksha and Kalasha. So these are various ornamentation. You can know a couple of names of them, especially Kalasha, Amalaka and Yali. We will be dealing about this many times, so please remember these particular names. Yes, a quick summary of whatever we have dealt with regard to the structure of the temples. So we have a sanctum sanctorum, which is the Garbhagriha, a mandapa we have, which is a portico or a hall, and it is generally used to house the worshippers. Followed by that, we have a shikara. It is a mountain-like spire. It can be shaped in the shape of a pyramid, or it can be curvilinear also. Followed by that, we have a vahana, which is the mount or the vehicle of the main deity. Moving on, the temple architecture. Temple architecture, with the development of a square sanctum, what actually developed or what actually started as a square sanctum and a pillared portico, it emerged during the Gupta period. It actually grew, and there was a gradual progress in this particular stage from the flat roofed monolithic temples in the initial stages to the sculptured shikara in the later years. So there was a slow progression from this flat roofed monolithic temples to the present day temples of what we have today. So this whole progression, it can be divided into 5 stages. And it all emerged, I am repeating the point again, it all emerged during the Gupta period. It was there previously also, but that was built more out of a perishable material, and that could not be classified completely as a temple. So please remember that. The very first stage, yes, the features of the temple it developed during the phase are, the temples had a flat roof. So you have a very flat roof here. Followed by that, the temples were square in shape. So this particular temples were completely square in shape. Followed by that, you have some shallow pillars, and most importantly, it was built on a low platform. In fact, you can say that there is not much of a raised platform. It is built on a very, very low level. So the prominent example of the first stage of temple is the temple number 17 at Sanchi. Please remember, it has been repeated in your NCERT books also, so it's very, very important. Temple number 17 at Sanchi, the most important characteristics are flat roof, square in shape, low platform and shallow pillars. Moving on to the second stage. Here, more or less it continued, but one key difference is the platforms. It was more or less raised platform. The temples were built on an upraised platform or on a higher platform. So this height is what happened during the second stage. And another important addition of this particular phase was a covered ambulatory passageway. So if you have this as the main temple, you can come around the main temple. So there was an ambulatory or a circumambulatory passageway for the people, for it to be used as a pradikshina path. Example is the Parvati temple, again at Nachna Kutara in Madhya Pradesh. So we have already dealt about Nachna like in previously also. This is one another Parvati temple at Nachna Kutara in Madhya Pradesh. Nachna has so much temples, which is the Nachna temples or the Nachna Hindu temples. Please, this is a very, very important place, the Nachna Kutara at Madhya Pradesh. Moving on to the third stage, this is an interesting stage, very important stage also. What happened is, this stage saw the preliminary emergence of a shikara in the place of a flat roof. You did not have a flat roof, rather there was a construction of a shikara, there was a beginning of a construction of a shikara in this particular stage. And the most important point is your point number 2. Panchayatan style of temple making was introduced. Yes, very, very important. It was once asked in UPSC also. Yes, we have a question with regard to this also, like coming in the very few while. In the Panchayatan style of temple making, what is it all about is that there were 4 subsidiary shrines. So, along with the main shrine, you have 4 subsidiary shrines along with the main temple deity. The main temple was square with an elongated mandap in front of it, giving it a rectangular shape. Now, this particular Deoghar temple, the Dashavatara temple at Deoghar, that was built on the lines of the Panchayatan style. The subsidiary shrines, they were placed opposite to each other, and the most prominent example is your Dashavatara temple at Deoghar and the Durga temple at Aihole. So, if you want to know about the Panchayatan style, this is the plan, the ground plan of the Deoghar temple. Now, this is the temple, the main deity is here. Followed by that, you have 4 subsidiary shrines. One in each corner, you have 4 subsidiary shrines, and later on it gradually evolved, and now we have the present day Panchayatan style. But this is the preliminary Panchayatan style of temples. Going to the 4th stage, the temples of this stage were almost similar to the previous temple, except the main shrine, it became more and more rectangular in shape. The example is the Ther temple at Sholapur. The 5th stage, here the temple was more of a circular shape. The introduction of circular temples was the characteristic feature of this particular stage of temple architecture. Rest of the features of the previous stage were more or less continued, and the example is your Maniyar Mat temple at Rajgir. So, Rajgir at Bihar. So, Maniyar Mat temple in Bihar is the famous example. Now, let us come back to the first slide which we started with. The temple architecture, I mentioned this point, it started with the development of a square sanctum and a pillared portico. It emerged during the Gupta period. Later on, because of the influence and because of the efforts and because of the patronage of the local dynasties, of the local rulers, you had some of the regionalistic styles of temple making which came into picture. So, there was a slow progression, and that is what we are going to see. So, in short, if you want to take the styles of the temple architecture, we had broadly the Nagara style and the Dravidian style, followed by that, under the patronage of the local rulers, different styles of architecture developed in the different regions as given above. So, you had these particular localistic styles of architecture also, like for example, the Nayaka style, Vesara style, Hoysala style, Vijayanagara style, and Pala schools of Bengal. So, these are the important styles of temple architecture. We shall be dealing about each and every style of temple architecture in the forthcoming modules, starting with the Nagara styles and the Dravidian style. Especially UPSC is very fond of the Dravidian style. The most important Dravidian style of temple would be your Brihadishwara temple, asked so many times in UPSC. So, you have to know much about the Nagara style and the Dravidian styles of temples. Yes, we have a question for today. With reference to the cultural history of India, the term Panchayatan refers to which of the following? So, this was asked in the case of preliminary exams of 2014, and as we have seen in this particular module, the term Panchayatan, it refers to a style of the temple construction. So, the correct answer should be C. Yes, that brings us to the end of this particular module, and in the next module, as I have told you, we will be dealing about the Nagara styles of temple architecture and the Dravidian styles. Thank you so much.